You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the Sports Map Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
Our next guest is now a big national star. He is the host of New York, a podcast on the Ringer and the Spotify podcast networks. He's a former host at WFAN in New York City. He is the great John Jastremski, and he joins us now on our progressive guest line. JJ, appreciate you making some time, and congrats to you on the new opportunity with the Ringer.
Jake, I appreciate that, man. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Still sounds a little weird when you say former WFAN host, but 9 years in the books, now taking names, kicking butt at the Ringer. And I got to be honest, Jake, I feel like I'm Robert Downey Jr. before, a movie comes out. I've been making the rounds, doing these interviews all week. Now I'm kind of getting a sense of how these celebrities feel, my man.
Well, I appreciate you squeezing me in, man. I mean, I've told this story to you on the air.
You were right at the top of my list. Don't worry about that.
I appreciate it. John and I used to work together at FAN, and honestly, one of the most, enjoyable times being in the building was getting a chance to work on your show. So I'm so happy for you. I'm glad that you get this great opportunity with the Ringer, and it's right up your alley, right? I mean, the podcast is all about anything happening with New York sports.
You nailed it, Jake. A lot of people were wondering when I made it from WFAN to the Ringer, is it going to be a lot of the elements that you have in play when you're on the radio at WFAN? And I'm telling people, yes, and yes. We are doing a New York style, New York type of show in this like jam-packed hour window, 3 to 4 days a week, where, I'm going to be spitting fire on what's going on with the teams. We got listener voicemails, which we're interacting to. We got all sorts of great guests coming on. We got the gambling mixed in. And it's basically what I've done for 9 years in a different way, different platform. So all in all, Jake, it's been an incredible start, man. We got to keep it rolling, bro. Long way to go.
The irony in you being a diehard Yankee fan, as am I, by the way, you, of course, now working for Bill Simmons, who is a noted Boston sports fan.
Oh, I kind of like that because now throughout this season, Jake, when things are not going on so well with the Red Sox, I get a chance to needle my new boss. Normally you would say you don't want to go after your new boss, that you want to play nice to your new boss. Doesn't work that way with Bill Simmons, man. You gotta kind of one up them any which way you can. And with Yankee Red Sox games or Dolphin Patriot games, I absolutely plan on doing so.
Absolutely. John Jastremski joining us here now with the Ringer. Once again, his podcast, New York. You can find it on the Ringer and the Spotify podcast networks. I mean, you start this podcast, JJ, and then a day after, a day later, I should say, the Jets decided to trade Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers. So I know you did an emergency podcast talking about that deal. Give our audience your take. Did the Jets make the right move moving on from Sam and now likely taking Zach Wilson with the second overall pick?
Yeah, Jake, I think that they did. Look, I think Sam Darnold was dealt an incredibly unfair hand the last 3 years with the Jets. Terrible coaching, playmakers who were not particularly good. It was a really bad setup. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself this question. Were the Jets going to find happily ever after with Sam Darnold as quarterback of the New York Jets? And the sense and the prevailing thought that I kept coming back to was no. They were not going to find that. You had the second pick in the draft. You have a new coach coming in. Douglas in his second year. It's basically a chance for the Jets in many ways to kind of clear the deck and basically restart the organization. It's just seamless to do so now with Zach Wilson, more than likely, with a rookie quarterback, and then you go from there. Yeah, you're right about the fact that we had to hop on right away. I figured I was doing a podcast Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday this week. Darnold gets traded. DeGrom and the Mets blow a game. I said, the hell with that, with tape on Monday. So that immediacy, obviously, is key. And listen, Stefan, I think your team made the right call. Now you got to see if you can build it the proper way and the right way with a new young quarterback coming in.
What is your level of confidence that Joe Douglas is the right guy to build it the right way? He said he wants to build through the draft. The Jets now have 21 draft picks over the next 2 years, including 2 1s this year, 2 1s next year, 2 2s next year. I mean, they're set up to do it the right way. But it all comes down to the fact, can Douglas hit on these picks?
Nailed it. I am cautiously optimistic, Jake, about where they're headed as an organization, because I think they have kind of in some way followed the blueprint of what we saw the Miami Dolphins do a couple of years ago. We simulated all these draft picks. It sets you up. You're going to be well under the salary cap, so when you want to strike in free agency, you can. But, Jake, I think we've learned this over the years. You don't want to build your team through free agency in the NFL. It doesn't work. You want to complement your team through free agency, but you want to build your team through the draft. It comes down to the simple fact of, can you get the right quarterback? Can you build the right infrastructure? And can you now make all of these picks, or a good majority of these picks, work in the idea of trying to build your team the right way?
How do you feel about Zach Wilson as a prospect, and would he be your choice if you're the Jets and you have the second pick and you could pick any quarterback, basically not named Trevor Lawrence?
Well, that's what it comes down to. Lawrence is the clear-cut number one, in my opinion. What's weird about the Wilson narrative and dynamic, and I don't know if you feel this way, Jake, I felt like in December and in early January, he was kind of getting slept on. He probably wasn't getting talked about nearly enough. Then it got to a point over the last few weeks where you even had some folks saying that I would take Wilson over Trevor Lawrence. So to me, I think he's the second quarterback in this draft. I do. I am a little alarmed with the up and down nature of Justin Fields. As good as he was against Clemson in the semifinal game, I look back at the tape in the Big Ten championship game. I look back at the Indiana tape, and it just didn't scream top two quarterback in the draft. I could be wrong on that. That could change over time. I don't think Fields is the guy. I think the NFL is a copycat league. Can I sit there and tell you that I've watched every single game that Zach Wilson has played at BYU? Absolutely not. But you see the success of Josh Allen. You see the success of Justin Herbert. Big-armed, mobile, big dudes. Wilson kind of fits that description. I think the NFL, that league. I think the Jets are going to follow suit in that, my friend. I think they're taking the second best quarterback in this draft. Now we'll see if he ends up living up to the billing, and does he have the right chutzpah? Does he have the right kind of intestinal fortitude to go and handle New York City, which is always $1 million question.
You're right. I totally agree. What's crazy to me, though, when you look at the top five of this draft, JJ, and you have Lawrence going 1, Wilson going 2, the fact that it looks like Mac Jones is going to go 3, he's going to get picked before Justin Fields, that to me is crazy. Do you see it going that exact way? And how many quarterbacks potentially go here in the top 5?
I do think it's going to go that way, 1, 2, and 3. I'm as surprised as you are, but here's what it boils down to. Kyle Shanahan has a certain vision for what he's looking for out of a quarterback. Remember, he worked with Kirk Cousins. He worked with Jimmy Garoppolo for years. There's just Matt Ryan, of course, from his days with the Atlanta Falcons. I think he sees a lot of similarities to Mac Jones and his cerebral nature that he thinks he can kind of mold and groom and grow with as the Niners kind of move forward. The question is going to be Atlanta. Atlanta is that team, Jake, where do they take the successor from Matt Ryan, or do they say, look, take one last run of this with Ryan, with Julio Jones, maybe trade down a couple of spots, maybe go and get somebody who is the best player on the board. To me, in many ways, this draft begins with Atlanta at 4. And it's very, very hard to handicap right now what team moves up to get a quarterback. Is it somebody like Denver? You probably rule Carolina out of that because they just went and got Sam Darnold. The Dolphins are not taking a quarterback. I don't think the Eagles, now who have moved down, are taking a quarterback. The Lions try to, position themselves to do so. A lot of moving parts here. But in many ways, this draft starts at 4 with Atlanta and what they're going to do.
It just scares me knowing New England still doesn't really have their quarterback answer yet, and they could be the team that moves up. I know you and I both root for a team in the AFC East. We can't stand the Patriots. I worry that they're going to make a big move. They're going to end up, let's say, Justin Fields, if he slides in the draft, and here we go all over again with Belichick getting his quarterback. The Jet fan in me, JJ, is worried about New England.
Yeah, and they spent a boatload of money in the offseason. Their defense is going to be so much improved. And I agree that they're going to look to go and get themselves a quarterback because they are not going the road of we're tearing down the franchise. That's not the way the Patriots handled this offseason. I wouldn't be surprised, Jake, if Trey Lance ends up in New England because I think he alongside Cam Newton, that would be interesting to watch, like watching Trey Lance maybe sit for a couple of weeks, maybe sit for a full year and kind of take in everything that Cam's bringing to the table and run almost in some way a similar type of style of offense the minute he comes in and takes that gig. I think Trey Lance is the guy to watch for New England.
John Jastremski joining us here from the Ringer. Once again, his new podcast through the Ringer and Spotify, New York, New York. If you're a New York sports fan, you got to listen to it, download it wherever you get your podcast. Let's talk about the local baseball teams for a moment here, JJ. Any big takeaways through the first couple games? I mean, the Mets have barely played, but they did get their first win last night, and the Yankees do what they always do, beat up on the Orioles so far.
Well, listen, the Yankees are going to win a boatload of games. The Yankees are going to hit a ton of home runs. And, Jake, it will boil down to the fact of can they hit enough in October? Can they get those big hits against quality pitching with runners in scoring position? And who is going to step up outside of Garrett Cole? We saw Garrett Cole last night. He mowed through the Orioles for 13 strikeouts in 7 innings. He is going to be one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's worth every penny. The guy's an absolute stud muffin. I can't get enough of Garrett Cole. But the Yankees are going to the postseason. That's just obvious. Are they going to be able to win in the postseason? From a Mets standpoint, normally, Jake, opening day is money in the bank for the Mets to go and win. Not this year. They had that meltdown loss. They take the DeGrom out after 77 pitches. But to their credit, they bounced back and have a good win last night against the Phillies. I think the Met lineup is deep. I think the Mets are going to score runs. My question for them, back end of the bullpen, who's getting out? It's looked very shaky the first 2 games. And their rotation outside of DeGrom, who are going to be those guys to step up? Stroman looked good last night. Talks a big game. Is he going to walk the walk all year? David Peterson pitched well. You get Syndergaard back midway through the year. So the Mets in a very competitive 90 East, I think they got to answer those questions about rounding out a rotation and the bullpen if this is going to be the division for the first time since 2015.
Finally, JJ, who is the dream podcast guest, a New York sports guest? If you could have anyone on New York, New York, who's the one person you'd love to make that call and get on the show?
Wow, that's a loaded question right there.
Could be anyone.
I'm going to throw a little No, but does it have to be? Let me ask you a question now as a follow-up, Jake. Does it have to be somebody I've had on in the past or no?
Anyone you want on. They could be on a former show of yours, a friend of yours, a celebrity you've never spoken to. Who's the dream guest that you want on New York, New York?
All right. Because I've never had him on, throw him out there for Mad Dog or so. I chatted with Mike. I hope we have that set up. I played golf with the great Joe Beningo last weekend.
Yes.
Those are my guys. I don't want to give you a player, Jake. That's no fun, yeah, I'd love to have Don Mattingly on the show, or I'd love to have Andy Pettit on the show. But I feel like getting a little personality, dominated the radio media industry for 20 years. Dog and I in the same Zoom room, I don't know if the world can handle that, to be honest with you.
He just handled Stern, so can he handle you? That's the big question.
I was going to say that's easy, but that's easy, though, because Howard, listen, nobody's better than Howard. Jake, they're talking gummies, for goodness sake, on Howard Stern. Must be nice.
Must be nice is right. John, I can't thank you enough for the time, my friend. Congrats to you on the podcast. Once again, the podcast, New York, New York. It's on the Ringer and Spotify. Check it out right now. JJ, you're the best. Thanks so much. Continued success.
Appreciate you, Jake. We'll catch up soon, man.
Absolutely. John Jastremski joining us there on our progressive guest line. Quick break, and we're back. We wrap up hour 2 of our show. This is the Jake Asman Show here on Sports Map Radio.
The Jake Asman